Welcome to the Rising from the Ashes podcast. I'm your host, Amy Grace. Obsessed with coffee, cowboy boots, and deep relationships, I'm on a mission to help you find the gold in your story through faith, family, and wellness. Because I believe your story can break you wide open to live a beautiful, abundant, and vibrant life. I'll share with you how the hard seasons and difficult circumstances can become a catalyst of growth that often lead into some of the most beautiful stories we've ever told. I'm so grateful you're here. Grab a cup of coffee and let's talk. Welcome back to the podcast, friends. Today's guest feels a little extra special to me. Her work has impacted me in so many ways, and I will always be grateful for the mindset truth she shares and teaches. Let me introduce you to Jenn Boughey. Jenn is a wife, mama of 4, life coach, and entrepreneur. She has a master's degree in psychology and counseling and has spent 15 plus years in the personal development space and 5 years in the mindset space. Her mission is to empower women like me and you to know our true worth, break free from the lies we've told ourselves, and help us link the connections between our thinking and our outcomes in life. I'm so excited to have you listen in on this conversation about identity. Welcome to the podcast, Jenn. I feel very honored and privileged to have this opportunity. Thank you for being here.
Yes, I'm so excited. I love your story. I love getting to know you a little bit through Instagram and just being connected over the past several years. So I'm pumped. I'm excited for what you're doing. I love that you're getting your story out there and your voice out there. And I'm just honored to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think I actually ran across you first from Brittany with Loverly Gray, Life with Loverly.
Yeah.
I think I heard you first on a podcast with her. So I feel like I've been following you for a few years now, but I love your content, your heart.
Thank you.
I don't know, you've been so inspiring and so encouraging.
It's been, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's been such a joy being able to connect with women like you and to be able to just put an empowering message out there. I think a lot of us who are go-getters and overachievers, and we have 1,000 things on our plates, and we want to feel this confidence. And at some level we are confident, but also we struggle a lot, right? With our minds and what we're thinking and how we're believing about ourselves. And so it's been such a joy. And I'm so thankful for Brittany's platform. And she's given me such a platform to be able to share my message even more. So I love that.
That is incredible. Well, Jenn, one common thought that I hear from you, whether it's like on Instagram or on a podcast episode, is your life will follow your thoughts and your repeated thoughts become your beliefs. And you even say over on your website, you say, you are what you think. Your words, thoughts, feelings, and choices hold so much power, and you have the power inside of you to flip the script. You can truly change the trajectory of your life by changing the way you think, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. And what I get from that is that, like, my thoughts become my beliefs, which in turn become my identity. And I can for sure relate. I know that has been true for me in different stages of life and different seasons. But I want to hear your thoughts, because it seems like our identity becomes like this ceiling in our life. And it's like we say, well, this is who I am, therefore this is what I'm capable or not capable of. And so in a way, it feels like those identity statements really influence the opportunities that we're willing to go after, because it's like we've already pre-decided what we're going to do. And I think to even like take that a step further, something that I've realized is like those identity statements or beliefs about ourselves also influence who we feel like we have access to and the possibilities beyond today of like, what could our life look like? Could it ever be different? Because this is the way it's always been. Tell me your thoughts around that. And do you believe that a person can change their identity?
I love that. You are speaking my love language with thoughts and beliefs. So yes, there's a thing called metacognition, and metacognition is simply to be thinking about your thinking. And if we even go back to the word, the Bible says to take every thought captive and align it with the truth of Christ, right? And so oftentimes, especially in mindset work and in the Christian world, sometimes it's this delicate balance, right? Of like, is it woo woo? Is it really of God? And what I love to say is that Jesus was the author of mindset work because he continued to tell us to take our thought captives, to renew our mind, to be renewed by the word. And so I think we're constantly renewing our identity as Jesus is pulling back these layers of who we are. He's helping us see things that maybe in one season we can't see something, but in another season he gives us the enough grace to be able to deal with something, to be able to like really see ourselves in the mirror for maybe the sin that we have, or maybe the habits that aren't really edifying who we are, who we want to become. And so he gives us the grace to be able to see that. So I definitely think, we can change our identities. I have done that even in my own life. I'm a drastically different person than I was 20 years ago. And I'm so thankful for that. I'm thankful for the hope that Christ gives us in that. But kind of going back to our thoughts and our beliefs, you're exactly right. In fact, where our thoughts come from our beliefs. So as we're growing up and we're in our family of origins and we're around certain relationships, whether that's our parents or coaches, it could even be best friend relationships, we begin to identify with what we can and what we can't do, what's available to us and what's not, the type of person we are and who we are not. Oftentimes, especially even in my family, and I know we might talk about kids a little bit later because it is so important, because who we are is where our kids' identity comes from, because they see themselves in us, right? But we oftentimes say in the Boughey household, we are truth tellers. And so that's an identity that my kids are grabbing onto, like we're truth tellers. And so, I had a call from the elementary school principal just a couple of weeks ago, and he's talking about this thing that happened between one of my daughters and another boy in the class. And he said that I pulled her in separately to ask her, and she told the truth about everything. And I was just so surprised by that. And I said, I'm not, because that's just who we are. And I tell my kids day in, day out, we are truth tellers, because if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything, A, and B, that you're blameless before Christ and you can go and ask for forgiveness and you are forgiven. But if we lie and we try to cover it up and then you're trying to remember what story you told, all of that becomes a piece of our identity. And so what I help my clients really look at is, I love for them to look back at their family of origin and really understand, what did they learn about who they were? What was their family about? What were the values that they lived out of, both positive and negative? My mother had an incredible work ethic. She was a single mom. She busted tail to feed 2 kids and get us to all of our sports and get up early. And I honestly don't know how she cloned herself. She didn't, but it feels like she did. But that's where I get my work ethic from. And I'm so thankful for that. But that's a belief that's deep down on the inside of me, right? That like, wow, I can do hard things. And even when hard comes up in life, because guess what? For all of us, it will. That's not something that is to deter me. That's something to actually make me lean into and push even harder and build that grit around. But then there are also other beliefs that I grew up believing, that like I'm a burden and I'm not lovable and I'm unseen in many ways, right? And so I took that into my teen years and into my college years and made some really, really poor decisions because I was so hungry for love. I was so hungry for attention. I was so hungry to be told that I was worthy. And while I wasn't outwardly saying that, those were beliefs that were deep down the inside of me that I was living from. So beliefs really are something you live from. They're not really something you think about. But stay with me, because your beliefs, if we think about it, your beliefs are like the foundation. That's like the soil, right? It's like where everything is growing from. And so you're just living from that soil. You're just living from those beliefs. So if there's a behavior or there's a habit or if there's a habitual thing that you're continuing to do and you don't love it, we need to go back and really investigate, what am I believing about this or about myself or about the situation that I am having these patterns of behavior, because you're living from your beliefs at all times. But also our thoughts are birthed from our beliefs. So all of your thoughts about what you're capable of, what you can do, what's possible, who you are, what could happen, what will happen, those are all born from our beliefs. So if I felt unworthy, I'm going to constantly be telling myself, I'm forgotten, no one loves me, I'm not worthy of this particular friendship, I can never have what she has. I'll be in kind of constant comparison because I really don't think that I'm worthy. And then there's this thing, and I'll let you talk right after this because I'm sure you might have some questions.
Good.
But there's this thing called confirmation bias. And confirmation bias simply confirms what we're already believing. So what happens is, if I believe that I'm unworthy or I'm unlovable, I'm going to go out into the world and I'm putting on a pair of sunglasses, if you will, that is filtered into believing that I'm not worthy. And I'm going to scan all of my environments, all of my circumstances, everything that I'm bumping into in the world to confirm that I'm not worthy. And so what we do is we create this self-fulfilling prophecy, and then we create more thoughts and more deeper beliefs that I'm not worthy because that's all that we're looking for. So yes, our beliefs limit us because we're actually not standing on the truth of God, right? If we were standing on the truth of God, who said we are worthy and we are clothed in righteousness because of what He's done, not what we've done, then we're going to be looking at the world from a different perspective, and we're going to be believing and acting and thinking different because our whole belief system is different.
Absolutely.
So the confirmation bias. Another easy way, and if this wasn't sticky for you, another easy way is to think about confirmation bias is if you were going to go out and buy a blue Honda and you've decided, I want a blue Honda Accord, that's what I want to buy. All of a sudden you start looking for them, right? And now everywhere you go, what do you start seeing?
Blue Honda Accord.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Again, because you're aware of it, it's top of mind. It's a priority. It's what you're thinking about. It's what your brain is focusing in on. And so the same is true for your thoughts. If you believe a negative belief, that's all that you're going to find. But the other thing is true as well. Let's say you wanted to buy a Toyota 4Runner. They're all over the place as well. But because you're not looking for it, you don't see it. So we have to really begin to challenge our beliefs. And what is it that I'm believing? And is it really helping me become who I really want to become? And is it based on the truth of God?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And it's funny you bring up that concept because I was re-listening to a podcast episode that you did with Life with Loverly, and you were talking about the victim versus victor mindset in that episode. And you referenced the reticular activating system in our brains, but it was the same concept because you said, if you believe something about yourself or you think you're the victim, that's going to and like, that's what's going to happen is you're going to go out and find evidence for that. That's right. Like, it's so wild because like when you break it down into like a everyday life example, it's like, wow, like our brains really do that. So I feel like you've kind of touched on this already about how our mindset shapes our identity. But it's fascinating, just like those core beliefs. Really, like that's where our thoughts are rooted, is what I hear you saying. And so like our whole thinking is based out of those beliefs that we had that sometimes we're not even aware of. And it's like you said, why do I keep making this decision? Or why do I find myself continually repeating this, thing that I don't want to do? And it all goes back to those beliefs. It's fascinating.
It is so fascinating. Yeah. And to touch on the reticular activating system, the way that you can view that is the reticular activating system, for those of you who didn't listen to that podcast, I can tell you now, it's all about making it the focus of what you're believing. So the reticular activating system is basically scanning your entire environment, trying to pick up on evidence for what you're believing. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you can believe anything you want. I think people forget that. I think we're so stuck in what we grew up in or what we know or what we believe to be true. And kind of going back to the word that you use, ceiling, we put this ceiling on ourselves and we force ourselves into this box. And we're so frustrated because we're banging up against the side and the top of the box. And we're like, I feel so stuck. I can't break out of it. But the only person who's keeping you imprisoned is you. Which is really hard to think about, right? It's very hard to think about. And sometimes, honestly, in the mindset world and in this work, it can be really hard. A lot of people don't want to look themselves in the mirror and be very, very honest with ourselves. That's the hardest part. Mm-hmm. But also inside the hardest step of looking at yourself and being very honest is also the most freeing part. Yeah. Because now you have 100% control to change that and to start challenging, why am I limiting myself? Or why do I feel like I have to stay in this box? Why can't I be like that person? Why can't I be super successful? Why can't I change my legacy? Billy and I have a lot of divorces on both sides of our family. And so the fact that we've been married for almost 15 years is a miracle in and of itself. But we talk about that all the time. That is one of our biggest values and also one of our, I guess, life purposes is for us to stick together, create a legacy, and change generations. But that is because we are believing at a different level. If we simply stayed inside that box and we just looked at what was available for us growing up, we absolutely adore and love all of our parents. But if we just looked at what we saw, then that will be just what we do. And I think this is oftentimes kind of getting into also why people say, why am I becoming just like my dad or just like my mom or just like so and so, when that's like the very least person that I want to become like? It's because we do what we were modeled. We don't know any other way of relating. We don't know any way of doing life other than what we saw. And so you have to be very intentional to seek out coaching, therapy, the Bible, scriptures, parenting books, whatever it is. You have to learn a different way. Otherwise, you're just going to keep repeating the cycle, which is why it's so important that you really, truly understand what is it that I believe and what are the beliefs that I'm living out of and how am I keeping myself limited? Because God's not limiting you, because God is a limitless God, right? And he's creating all kinds of possibilities. It's almost like sometimes it's like, think about Monopoly. God's passing us this ticket to like, go past go, right? And we're like, no, we can't. I'm not worthy. I can't do it. That's never been possible. We're like sitting here giving all the reasons and justifying why to keep ourselves stuck when he is simply giving us the pass to go, but we just won't do it because we're afraid. We're so afraid in so many ways. And a lot of it is because too, we're just not self-aware. We really honestly don't know what we believe. And so that's a big part of mindset work, is simply awareness, building awareness, and kind of going back to what I was saying in terms of looking ourselves in the mirror and being very honest with where we are and why are we doing that. So
yes, I love that example. That's like such a cool like picture on that. And I feel like I definitely had to get to this place where, and I don't know that I've ever like thought about it so clearly, like you've just stated it, of like, this is why and this is what we have to change. But I know over the past several years, I've really had to like walk out that process of like, okay, why am I thinking that? Like, how do I change that? And even like, where did that come from? Like, why is that something that I believe about myself? And it's so interesting to do this alongside Justin and for both of us to have this ongoing conversation of like, wait a second, why did we both just respond that way? Okay, like let's unpack the feelings. Let's unpack like all of the history, basically.
Yes.
And to have like this ongoing, very deep conversation of like, hey, how are we going to change that for the future? Because we are modeling that for our kids. And I think that is fascinating and also terrifying at the same time of like, my kids are learning from me and I still have a lot to learn. But it's so interesting how quickly they mimic our beliefs and our behaviors. So talk to us just a little bit about how our identity, like our beliefs, affect our children. And I know you touched on that a little bit earlier.
Yeah. Well, we just have to remember, like, I think about growing up, there were times when, my mom pointed out certain parts of her body that she didn't love. And so I internalized that. And again, she's not doing anything wrong. She's just simply vocalizing things that she doesn't love. But then I'm looking at my body as a little girl and being like, oh, well, my legs are wrong or my legs don't look good. And that's just a very simple, but very tangible example of a physical thing, right? It's just a physical thing. And so to this day, like I still kind of struggle with my legs. I don't love my legs, but again, not her fault. And we're never pointing back to our parents to blame. We're always just pointing back to understand, right? And I come actually from the therapy world. I was a counselor before I got into mindset work. And one of the biggest reasons why is because I love therapy and I think there's definitely need for it and their healing happens. But really where I wanted to go was okay, let's get an understanding why, but then let's move forward and really take action and move into something different. And so when we think about understanding like beliefs around our children, is that we have to understand what we are walking out. Our actions is what they're going to pick up on. I think we've all heard more is caught than taught. And so what you are doing, which again, your behavior is always attached to a belief, your behavior is what they're going to pick up on. And so also how you handle things. Like we talk a lot about reconciliation. And, you can be mad at someone, you can take your space, but we're always going to come back and we're going to communicate about what we were upset about. We're always going to make sure that we're implementing boundaries with one another. I use the word boundaries a lot with my kids, but what the belief is what they're learning is I'm valuable. I can be assertive. I can have my own space. I'm seen. I'm heard. I'm acknowledged. Those are all beliefs that they're going to grow up with that I love for them, because then that's going to really serve them well in life, right? They're going to be able to take a seat at the table and they're going to feel worthy, hopefully, right? And we're definitely going to mess up. I think part of what you said, it's like, our kids are watching. I think the biggest way that I get over that is like, you know what, we're sinful and we are going to mess up. And there are going to be so many conversations I have with my kids when they get older where I get to, right? I don't have to, but I get to apologize to them and tell them I truly was doing the best that I could. And now as your mom and you're 26 or 36, whatever age they'll be, now I see and I understand. And again, because we're modeling the reconciliation piece as much as we can right now, then we're going to also be able to do it in the future. I don't know if I'm fully answering your question, but I think my biggest thing is modeling. We have to understand what we're modeling, and what we believe about ourselves becomes the ceiling for our kids, at least while they're in our house, right? So if you're not painting possibility, right? If you're not helping them understand that like, hey, it's not about the grade you got, it's about the effort. That's what they're going to believe is true, right? But if you're focusing on just the performance, and they're going to believe, oh, I'm only worthy or only good enough whenever I'm performing at a certain level, right? But it's really where you put your focus, and it's really what you believe is important as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I'm so aware of that at the moment. Not that I have all the answers, but I have found that I've really struggled with like that enoughness piece of like, am I enough for you? Did I do enough for you? So maybe it goes back to like value. And so with my kids starting school, they both went to school. They've done preschool and stuff, but like real school this year, it kind of reminded me of like, why am I praising them? What am I praising them for? Am I praising them for like their character and their effort, or am I praising them for the end result that they got? And I had to kind of like come back and like check in with myself of like, hey, it doesn't have to be perfect for it to be good. If they, gave their best effort and went all in, then that is still good.
Right. Love that.
And it's also interesting, like their personalities are different and just their abilities and their talents are different, and just reminding not to compare. And I think like that's something that I still have to remind myself of is like, we're all individuals. We're all created differently and uniquely, and that's good. And we're not all going to be the same. We're not all going to have the same strengths. But just because I don't have the same strength as someone else doesn't make me bad or not valuable or not enough.
Yes. I love that you point that out, because what you're saying is like really emphasizing their strengths and what they're uniquely crafted for. Having 4 children, they're very different, right? And one child may not struggle in one area that the other child like really struggles in. And so, yes, like pulling out their strengths and helping them see what they can't see for themselves. I think about it even like from a client perspective. I oftentimes say I love to hold belief for my clients where they can't hold belief for themselves, until over our coaching relationship, I pass the baton to them, right? And now they're holding the belief and they're operating in it. And now their whole life is changing, right? Because they're believing something completely different. But we can do the same thing for our kids. We can believe on behalf of our kids. Recently, one of my children kind of has this mindset of, everyone's leaving me out. Everyone doesn't want to invite me. She has honestly a victim mindset. And it's so painful to see, because you see the damage that she allows to happen, right? Because she's just sitting there believing all these things, and she's looking at it from a very skewed lens. And yes, there are times maybe when her siblings really honestly don't want to play with her. But what's interesting is it's because of her victim mindset. She is pouting and she's saying they don't want to play with her, and she's crossing her arms and she's being a pill. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So even in those moments where she can't believe that she's valuable and she's wanted and she's invited, I have to show her and remind her, no, remember these other times, like you are just seeing it from a different perspective
Mm.
because you are being blinded and you're not seeing it correctly. And so holding that belief for our kids and knowing they're not going to get it right away, and that's okay. But it's kind of like I'm their biggest cheerleader and I'm going to be
Yeah.
the one that's going to show them what's possible. So yes, I love that. But I think, yeah, just anchoring in on what their strengths are and helping them see maybe what they can't see in themselves. I think it's really important. But listen, a really big thing I preach on is like, we can't do for others what we haven't done for ourselves. And so when people come to me
So
and they're like, I
good.
don't really know if I should do mindset work, like, is it really possible? And I'm like, look, if you want to make a difference in your legacy and you want your kids to not deal with the demons that you're dealing with, you got to deal with them first because you can only help someone else with what you've currently or you've already gone through. It's kind of like putting on your oxygen mask first before you do your kids, right? I used
Yeah.
to never understand that, by the way. I'm like, no, I'm going to save my kid first, but it makes so much sense. No, I'm going to pass out while I'm trying to put theirs on. And then guess what? We both pass out with no oxygen. So you got to take care of yourself first. You got to learn how to do this work first and make sure you're diving in and being intentional and really desiring change for yourself. And then you can go and really model that and do it for your kids. Not that you can't do it simultaneously, because you can as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that you kind of answered my next question, because I was going to ask you, if someone is able to change their own identity, do you believe that they can change their legacy? And I think you just answered that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I will tell you, just even from my own personal story, like I said, we have a lot of divorces in our family. And even changing the belief system for myself has changed everything. It's changed the type of person I married. I would not have been looking for someone like Billy. I would have not thought that I was worthy of it.
Mm.
I would have felt super uncomfortable inside the relationship because of how he was treating me. I was really used to guys treating me poorly and not
Mm-hmm.
and not treating me like I was worth it. Because here's the thing, you get out of life what you believe for. You get out of life what you believe for. So if I believe that I'm unworthy or I'm unlovable or it's not possible for me, then that's what I'm going to go out and get and search for. And that's what I'm going to draw to myself. So you have to really be careful about what you're believing, because that's what you attract, because that's what you think you're worthy of. Right. And so it has changed everything about what has been possible from the type of, even the type of conversations that Billy and I have had because of the type of partner he is. Very similar to you and Justin in terms of we just hash it out right there. Our fights
Mm-hmm.
are very short. We do it right in front of the kids. It's very tasteful. It's very respectful, right? We are definitely disagreeing, right? But the kids see us work it out within 5 minutes. And then
Mm-hmm.
very quickly, it's like, hey, I'm on your team. Yeah, hey, I'm on your team. My bad. I'm sorry. And we're quick to repair that. But that is a completely different legacy than what we saw growing up, both on both sides of it. And I think one thing Billy and I thought about when we first got married is, man, we're really at a disadvantage because neither one of us knows what marriage looks like. Like, what does that even look like? Neither one of us grew up with a mother and father in the same household.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also what's been our biggest strength, because it's our weakest link. But that's where we pull Jesus in and we say, hey, you're the model. You got to teach us. We have to be so humble. We have to be very coachable, very teachable. We have to constantly be leaning in and checking ourselves, because it's like the one thing that he's given us the privilege to be able to change, which is the legacy for our kids. And so I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, I'm just so excited for you that you get a mom and dad, that you can come down and crawl in our bed with a mom and dad. That just blows my mind, because I've never experienced that. But the joy that I get to give my kids by having that. And then also, honestly, not in the topic of conversation, but I think something to be aware of if you're in the same situation is there is a reparenting of my little Jen on the inside of
Mm-hmm.
me that I get to heal in the process of creating another legacy for my kids. So there are times, actually, even this morning, I rolled over and Scout has been sleeping in our bed. We are not co-parent or co-sleeping parents, but somehow the fourth baby has
Sometimes.
gotten herself in our bed. And I leaned over this morning and I was going to get up, and Billy was already up, but she was just sitting there facing me and just asleep. And I just scooted over to her, wrapped my arms around her, and I
Oh.
just soaked her in. But in that moment, it was also this like, if I could just hug my little self like this. And I did,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's a beautiful thing. Anything is possible with God. Beauty from ashes, right? He can do
Yes.
anything
Yes.
if you believe him for it and if you allow him to do it. We have to be hands open, right? He gives us the choice.
Yes. I just feel that so much. And I think it's so unique that, like, neither one of our boys were planned. And so
Oh,
they both
really?
came as a very shocking surprise. Um, but in that, it has been the biggest gift, because I feel like that was kind of my first introduction to all of this is like, oh, I'm responsible for these tiny humans and I really need to figure out my life. But also just to get to re-experience childhood in a different way. And it's almost like you get to relive it through your kids. And I feel like that in so many ways, it's been so redemptive. So I feel that when you have that conversation.
Yes, yes. I think some people are like, why are you so obsessed with your kids? I'm not the one that has to be around my kids at all times. I'm definitely fine sending them away and going away for the weekend. But I was recently on a chaperone trip with two of my girls. They're in fourth and fifth grade. And so it was a fourth, fifth grade trip. And every time I got off the fourth grade bus, I mean, I would just like pan the crowd as the kids were getting off the fifth grade bus and just run over there and give her the biggest hug because I never had that opportunity. My mom was single and she was busting her butt doing all that she could. And I'm so thankful for that. I didn't have the opportunity to ever have a mom on a chaperone trip. And so it's like, yes, I'm finding her, but I'm finding myself and I'm getting to have that experience all over again. And it's truly just the best. So
I
yes,
love
you can
that.
change your legacy. There's so much that we can do when we change our beliefs.
Yes. So, kind of like going a little bit deeper here into this concept, but changing those core beliefs in our identity. I don't feel like it's going to happen overnight, or maybe I'm just really slow.
No, it's not going to happen overnight. I think a lot of people get frustrated by that too. It's like, why? Why is it not changing?
So, like, say like someone's been putting in the work, they're changing those core beliefs and like changing their identity, their outlook on life. But like they seem to keep struggling in certain areas or situations, like staying grounded in that, I would say, like new identity. Is that a thing? Like, can you like take on a different identity, say even like an old, like familiar identity in different relationships or in different like roles, say like going back to your family of origin, like when you're with them, slip back into that identity that you had growing up, or like in a marriage relationship, like slipping back into like, well, this is what my parents modeled. Or even like, I feel like in like careers, it's easy to be like, oh, I'm the new person. Like, let me, ask someone else. And then you realize like 7 years in, oh, maybe I'm not the new person anymore. Maybe I should be confident in my answer. Talk to me just a little bit about maybe like, I don't know if it's a good term. You can redefine this, but like trigger situations where you feel like it's easy to slip back into those old identity beliefs.
Yeah, it's absolutely so easy because we have to remember that's all that we know. One way that I've heard this described that was really powerful for me, if you think about like a large mountain, okay, right? And let's just say there's a massive pond up there and there's consistently water running down the mountain, okay? And the mountain, let's just say it's almost like stone, right? So there's rock. When the water is constantly falling down the mountain, over time, it's going to create grooves in the sand because it's going to create a pathway, right, for the water to come down.
Mm-hmm.
That is what you have created in your brain and in your behavior mechanisms and also in your belief systems, right? So you've had this one way of believing your entire life about certain things, right? And actually a lot of things, but okay. And so what happens is when you start to gain awareness, you're like, oh my goodness, I see the path. I see what I'm believing. I see how I'm limiting myself. I don't want the water to go down on the right side of the mountain. Now I want the water to go down on the middle, right? On the middle of the mountain, because that's where my new self is, right? And so what happens is we're like, great, we're all fired up. We understand it. We're aware. And we're like, yes, we're going to get the water to go down the middle. Well, here you are going back into either a familiar situation or maybe it's a relationship or it's a work setting, whatever it might be. And all of a sudden the water's going down where it's always gone down. But why would that be the case? It's because that's how it's always gone. So we have to remember there is so much training of our brains and awareness that has to happen, and intentionality and grace and self-compassion. And so many times where you have to redirect. And then finally, the 1,000th time. Maybe it's the 100th time. Maybe it's the 10,000th time. We don't know. It takes time with each belief, but it takes time for that water upstream to realize, oh, this is the new path. And then it stops going down the right side of the mountain. And then now all of a sudden it's going down the middle. And what's so fun with clients is, after working together, sometimes 4 months in, it might be 8 months in, they're like, I did it. I just did it. Like, oh my gosh, I just stood up for myself, or I was acting out of it. And I'm like, it finally took root. So yes, it is absolutely frustrating for that person when they see it and they just want to shift it. But we have to remember, if it's been 20 years, 30 years, for me, 40 years of you ingraining this belief, it takes time to shift that, and for your brain and your even the experience of the behavior of the belief to catch on and realize, oh, this is a safe way of believing, and this is how I'm going to start operating. And I'll give you one other analogy that I also use with my clients. I talk a lot about belief ladders. So we're on a ladder of a belief, right? And it could be anything. What's a belief you have? I'm trying to think. What's an easy belief that a lot of us could have? A belief could be money is hard to come by. We all have money beliefs, by the way, a lot of money beliefs. Okay. But one could be money is hard to come by. And so you're hanging on this belief, on this belief ladder, and you're standing on it, and it feels very solid. Why does it feel solid? Because your whole life you've been building up this belief ladder. You've been putting new pegs on it to walk up it. It's so strong and sturdy. You've been taking care of it, right? You're like sanding it and recoding it. Like, you love this belief. Why do you love this belief? Because you've always believed it. You believe it's so safe, right? And even though it's not a belief that's serving you, if you want to make a lot of money or step out on your own and be an entrepreneur, you love this belief because it's all you've known. So if you want to create a new belief, you have to build a new ladder. Well, when you start building a new ladder, it's going to feel very unfamiliar. It's going to feel very shaky. It's going to feel like the thing is about to crash and burn on you, which probably it will a couple of times. Why? Because you're fumbling your way through it, right? You don't know how to build a ladder. You're like, what do I do? Oftentimes we get our ladders from our parents. So we didn't even have to build the ladder. The parents just told us what to grab onto. And now we've made a clone of their ladder. And now we're climbing up it, and we're so frustrated, but we're being stuck because of what I call default beliefs. That's a whole nother thing. But default beliefs are simply beliefs we just grab onto from our parents. So you're building this new belief ladder. And oftentimes what we try to do is we try to straddle both ladders. So we're like, ooh, money is safe. That's such a strong belief for me. It feels very safe. I've known that my whole life, but I'm trying to switch to this new belief that money is easy to make. Money is abundant. Money, it's free flowing. It always is there. It's always shows up when I need it, right? Whatever the belief is. And when we're trying to straddle two ladders, what happens? We fall, right? We fall. Or we grab onto the ladder that we know is most secure, which is the belief we've always believed. So if you find yourself dancing between an old belief and a new belief, just know there's nothing wrong with you. You're not doing anything wrong. It's okay. It's part of the process, because every single time you fall off the ladder and you get back on the new ladder, you are building that belief even stronger. Or if we go to the water example, every time you shift that water from the right side of the mountain to the middle, you're building it even stronger, because every time you redirect and you get intentional about, no, I'm going to believe this. And if I truly believe this, remember, behavior is connected to a belief. So if your belief is different, you will know that you're acting out of it because your behavior will be different. Think about it. If you believe money is hard to come by, that's going to be a very, very different action than if you believe money is abundant, right?
Yeah.
You're going to feel like you can take more risk and you can do things, and there's freedom there. So, yes, it's very normal. And it does take time and a lot of repetition, which in this day and age, people want the microwave, right? They want the pill. They want the Ozempic. They want the quick fix. I get it. But true transformation takes time. And so if you are willing and you are committed, you will reap a lifetime of reward if you do the hard work.
I love that. I love that. So Jenn, in a recent Instagram post, it was related to overachievers, but you said, God knows my story. It was just like one line in your caption, God knows my story. And I know that you were talking about overachieving and measuring up and all the things, but I just found that statement so comforting, because it's like, God knows where we've been. He knows our full story. He knows all the things, all those beliefs that are ingrained into us that sometimes we don't even like understand fully. And I found it so comforting that like God knows, and He wants to redeem our story. He wants the best for us. How do you bring God into this identity concept? Like, who does God say I am? How do I really lean into that and live that out rather than it just being like a Bible verse? Can you talk about that?
Great. Yes. In fact, I was in college and I had tried my whole life to people please. And I was an overachiever. I was doing all the things. I was very image prone. So I just whatever it looked like on the outside. Didn't matter what the inside was like, right? It was a ball of mess, but no one would have known it.
That's
And
right.
I came to this point where, yeah, right. It's like, this is a mess, but how dare they find out? How dare they find out? Because remember, I was so afraid of being unworthy. So I was like, if they found out what a mess I was, they wouldn't love me. So I just got to keep putting it on. And I came to this point in my life after several relationships that were just not the best for me. And I realized I was really trying to find my identity in relationships. That I came to this point where I just had had enough. And I honestly did not know what the breaking point was. And a friend of mine who was actually in my sorority gave me the book Redeeming Love. I was not a reader. So the fact that I actually sat down and read this book is a miracle in and of itself and the evidence that the Holy Spirit exists. But I sat down, I skipped classes for 3 days and I laid in my bed and I read that book. And about 3/4 of the way through, it's all about the story of Hosea and how he goes back and he's rescuing her. And, and she's the least of these to be deserving and worthy of his love, but he's rescuing her. And, I just remember like looking up at the ceiling and holding that book, like eyes bawling, feeling so empty on the inside, feeling like I have done everything. I've tried everything. I've people pleased. I've got the achievements. I'm president of my sorority. I'm doing all the things. I'm on leadership panels. And I'm so empty. Like this can't be it. Like this can't be it. And so I just remember I just had this question pop up in my spirit. And I was like, where's my Hosea? Which is ironic, right? Because I'm still looking for the man to fulfill me. Oh my gosh. So, but even in that, God honored it because he said, I mean, it wasn't audible, but almost. He said, I am your Hosea and I will never fail you and I will never forsake you and I will always run after you. And that, I just get chills right now. That is something I had never heard in my whole entire life, let alone be modeled for me. And I think I think every human has fallen short of that, right? Because there's no love, there's no belonging like Jesus. And so I remember like sitting up and feeling this like jolt of energy in my body because remember I was just feeling so black on the inside. And I gave my life to the Lord in that moment and made a covenant with him that I would never date again until he gave me clearance and until he told me it was my husband, which sounds so Christian-y. Okay. It's cheesy. But for someone who was finding their identity in accolades and then in relationship, it was massive for me. And so I graduated college just a few months later. I severed every relationship I had in college. Not that they were terrible, but I really had to start from scratch and rebuild my identity in Christ. I was tired of controlling everything. I was tired of trying to figure life out on my own. And so what I did was, I found myself in Jesus. And so how do we bring Christ in this? Is I took the Bible at its word. And I continue to think about how we are image bearers, right? We are image bearers of Christ. And what would that look like for me to be an image bearer? And how do I put on his righteousness? How do I put on his worthiness? How do I begin to believe that what he says about me is true? And so the biggest question for me is reading those scriptures over and over and not just reading them, but like digesting them, right? Like thinking about those, meditating on those, believing that those are really true about me. And then also, we can't forget the work of the Holy Spirit who gave me the grace to really be able to begin to believe those at such a high level. In fact, even my family was like, what's gotten into you? Like, who are you? Right? Because every lick of time I was working in corporate America and then I was giving every bit of time to the church and to serving and to giving away. And my life became so less about me and so much about God and what God wanted and what he was calling me to and how could I be used for his vessel. And I was so less self-absorbed and more about him and his glory and what I could do for him. And so I like to say I lost myself, but I found myself in Christ. And when I did that, everything changed for me, everything, because then I no longer had the pressure to perform because it didn't matter. My audience was one. It wasn't now hundreds of people I was trying to please or try to be successful for or climb the corporate ladder for. It was Jesus, and like, what does he want me to do? So hopefully that answered your question.
I love that answer. I love that. Well, Jenn, to kind of wrap up today's episode, what are some action steps that we can implement to grow or transform our identity and live into our full potential?
I love that. I think it's such a big question, but I will give you a few tips that I feel like are very, very helpful. And one of them, the first one we've already talked about, but is to build self-awareness. We have to build self-awareness and understand what is going on. What am I thinking? What's the behavior? What are the habits I have? Why am I doing that? Where's the tension in my life? Where am I not happy? What's not working right now? And the reason why that's important is because we can't change what we're not aware of, right? Like, we have to be aware of what needs to be changed or what's going on in order to be able to change it. The second thing is I would be paying attention to what's the story you're telling yourself, about your past, about your future, about what's possible, about what God's saying about you, about your circumstance, about your vision, about what you want to do in life. We all have this bubbling deep down the inside of us, right? About what we want to do. I know you and I were speaking offline a little bit about that. Like, there's this bubbling in our spirit. And so many of us are so afraid to take that on. But again, if we think about what's the story I'm telling myself, what could be possible? Instead, we think about that doesn't work, or we tell ourselves, I can't because, or only if I had this, or if only she could or he would. We put all these limitations instead of saying, well, what if it worked out? And so let's pay attention to the story we're telling ourselves about ourselves. The other thing is if you really believed what God said about you was true, what would you be doing? If you really believed what God said about you was true, what would you be doing? How would you be acting? What would you not be worried about? Where would you conserve your energy? Where would you be putting your thought focus? What would your actions look like? Right. And then fourth, another question I'd love to ask is, if you knew you would be 100% successful, what would you do? What would you do? If there was like a no failure rate and you knew you could be successful, what would you do? And I think that can be really, really powerful, because I think there's something that's God-sized on the inside of you that you need to step into that identity and take a hold of, because the reality is only you can do that. No one can do it for you, right? So we have to step into that and trust God. And I talk a lot about obedience. God calls us into obedience, but inside the obedience, there is a level of faith that you have to have in order for him to come and show up. And then he takes it to the finish line. And I think, especially as overachievers, a lot of us think we have to have the whole plan and we have to have it all figured out. And we have to know, right, the 10-step process.
Yes.
Like, I am one of them. I get it, right? But I think what I have learned is that the most rewarding thing is if I just take a step inside my true identity and in an act of obedience, God comes up, God shows up, and he does the rest for us.
I love that. I love those tips. Jenn, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today. I'm so, so grateful for your work, and I look forward to connecting more in the future. Tell our listeners where they can find you.
You can find me at jennboughey.com on my website, or at Jenn Boughey on Instagram. Last name is a little bit different. It's Boughey, but would love for you to come and follow and comment on anything. I live in my stories, so come and visit me in my stories, but would love to get connected.
Thank you, Jenn.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.